Niska moves that the rules of the House be so far suspended so that House File number 2685 be recalled from the Committee on Education Policy, be given its second and third readings, and be placed upon its final passage.
I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Niska, to your motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First, I request a roll call.
Roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Niska.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Last October, the Minnesota Supreme Court issued a ruling that essentially bans women and girls sports in Minnesota based on biological sex categories. And so we need to fix Minnesota law now, especially in light of two recent developments that we've seen in the last couple of weeks. First, the International Olympic Committee issued new official policy aligning sports categories with common sex, biological sex categories, essentially making Minnesota law out of alignment with the international standard. And second, the Department of Justice sued the state of Minnesota because of our policy out of alignment with federal law. So it's important that we take up this bill now and begin the process of fixing Minnesota law, and I would defer to Representative Knudsen, the author of the bill, for further discussion.
I recognize the member from Cass, Representative Knudsen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Thank you, Leader Niska. As we all know, last week, State of Minnesota, the Department of Education, and Minnesota State High School League a lawsuit was filed against them for their noncompliance with Title IX. Minnesota has been on notice since September of 2025 to comply. This lawsuit could have been avoided, and it still can be, if Minnesota Democrats agree to comply with federal Title IX. Unfortunately, Governor Walz and the Minnesota Democrats are putting at risk more than $3 billion federal dollars that are tied to compliance for Title IX. Minnesota Democrats are not only endangering girls, but risking federal funds, and at a time when Governor Walz is also seeking to cut funding to our schools. Minnesota prioritizes gender ideology over biological reality. Members, this is not complicated. This is not extreme. It is common sense. For decades, Minnesota families have poured their hearts, their time, and their hard-earned dollars into girls' athletics. Title IX opened those doors so our daughters can compete, earn scholarships, and stand on podiums earned by their own sweat, tears, and perseverance. We are here today because that promise of equal opportunity has been broken. Science doesn't care about politics. Biological males possess, on average, 30 to 50% more in upper body strength. They have larger hearts and lungs and denser bones than biological females. Those advantages do not disappear with a pronoun change or a hormone prescription. Study after study conducted by sports physiologists, not politicians, confirm that. When biological males are allowed into girls' sports, girls lose. They lose medals, they lose roster spots, they lose college scholarships, they lose their safety. And when forced to share locker rooms with biological boys, they pay a profound emotional and psychological cost. In that moment, when a girl, still a child, must undress in the presence of a biological boy, something sacred is stolen from her forever. Her innocence isn't merely embarrassed, it's shattered. She learns too young and too cruelly that her body is not her own sanctuary, that her privacy is negotiable, and her sense of security is less important than someone else's feelings. This should have been a simple, protected space for girlhood. But instead, it has become a forced violation of privacy where trust dies and uncertainty is born. This is not inclusion. This is the quiet, systematic theft of childhood and forced maturation into a world that prioritizes ideology over protection. I know that some people will stand up and call this bill hateful, but let me be crystal clear. Protecting girls is not hate. Telling the truth about biology is not bigotry. The real discrimination is against the female athletes that deserve a fair playing field. Members, for all of these reasons and many more, I look forward to moving this legislation along today to take a stand to protect the girls of Minnesota.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Jordan.
Thank you, Speaker Dameth. And yes, members, Representative Knudsen is right. This is a hateful and bigoted bill. This bill discriminates against our trans students, and it discriminates against female athletes in this state. So not only is this bill a bad bill that you should absolutely relish the chance to vote against, but also there is no sense of emergency on this. We need to make sure that we can continue to pursue the House's business and not distract from the other urgency and distract from the political theater of trying to show that GOP members voted against gun control bills that will actually keep students safe in school. So members, for the reasons that this is a bad bill and not urgent, I urge you to vote no.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As you know, I'm the author of House File 12, the Preserving Girls Sports Act. And this is for my granddaughter, Jane. She's only 15 months old, but I know she's going to be a stellar athlete one day. But members, what we've seen since the last time this bill was heard in this chamber is, number one, the polling has not changed. 80% of Americans believe that only girls should play girls' sports. That includes 2/3 of Democrats. 67% of Democrats believe that only girls should play girls' sports. So on March 26th of this year, the International Olympic Committee announced it will only allow biological women to compete in women's events. And here's a quote from that. At the Olympic Games, even the smallest margins can be difference between victory and defeat, said the IOC President Kirsty Coventry in a video statement. So it's absolutely clear that it would not be fair for biological males to compete in the female category. And then we have the UN responding to that. The UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, Reem Al-Salem, today welcomed the adoption of the International Olympic Committee's new policy aimed to protect the female category in sport. The new policy, she says, is rooted in common sense, facts, and science. It restores dignity, fairness, and safety for women and girls in Olympic sports. She said, I welcome this policy as a necessary, proportionate, and legitimate step to ensure the protection of women and girls in line with international human rights law and standards. Evidence-based approaches, including the recognition of material reality of sex, must guide the development, monitoring, and review of sport policy at all levels. And just a few days later, as was already said, our own Department of Justice filed a lawsuit against Minnesota. This was preventable. This lawsuit was preventable. Had these bills that we're going to be talking about today become law last year, this lawsuit would never have been filed. So here we are. Taxpayers are probably going to be on the hook for this one too. But on the federal level, somebody has our girls' backs. According to the complaint, defendants, Minnesota Department of Education and the Minnesota High School League have engaged in sex-based discrimination by requiring girls to compete against boys in athletic competition that are designated exclusively for girls and allowing boys to invade intimate spaces designated exclusively for girls, such as multi-person locker rooms and bathrooms. These unfair, intentionally discriminatory practices violate every core of Title IX. Members, we shouldn't be here. This is common sense. The public is with us. The girls of this state are with us, and they need protecting. Let's not throw out all of their hard-earned time and effort to become excellent at the sport that they participate in. Let's not throw that out. Let's vote today to protect our girls.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Finke.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members, for another opportunity to have this discussion. We've had it before. I don't have a lot of new information to add. We've talked about this ad nauseum. We have inclusion as the law of Minnesota. That law has neither been changed nor overturned. We had a Supreme Court ruling in Minnesota affirm transgender inclusion is the law in the state of Minnesota. We know, and voters know, that this is not a real problem. This problem never existed until Republicans were instructed to make it a problem. And trans inclusion had been a part of our world forever before that, and we will be forever after this moment. I would like to also just remind the people of Minnesota that the President of the United States has given an 8 p.m. deadline for the annihilation of an entire country on the earth, and we are doing this, a problem that is not real, while the President is actually talking about destroying a nation, committing acts of war beyond the wildest imaginations that I could ever imagine. The people of Minnesota know what is a problem, and the people of Minnesota know what is not a problem.
I recognize the member from St. Louis, Representative Zalesnikar.
Madam Speaker and members, I think it's important to note that I authored House File 1233, and this bill provided a path forward to provide clear, consistent language rooted in law to address the Human Rights Act and the language that was put in the act. Today I rise. At its core, the bill addresses an issue that has clearly moved from debate to legal reality. The United States Supreme Court has weighed in on questions surrounding biological sex in athletes. In the Olympics, and Minnesota now finds itself under federal investigation for potential noncompliance with Title IX with the Minnesota State High School League. Title IX was enacted to ensure equal opportunities for women and girls in education and athletics. It opened doors that had long been closed, doors that my grandma wished she would have had the opportunity to have, to play basketball and to compete. Doors that allowed generations of female athletes to compete, to earn scholarships, and to succeed. In fact, women and men from both sides of the aisle celebrated this bill when it started 50 years ago, and they actually still celebrate it today. All the polls show this is an 80-20 issue. It's not Democrat or Republican. This is about Title IX, and it never was controversial before. But today, those protections are being tested as biological males who identify as female are competing in girls' sports, raising concerns about fairness and equal opportunity. So here we are today, and under current Minnesota law, the Minnesota Human Rights Act includes gender identity as a protected class. As a result, Minnesota State High School League is allowing biological males to compete in girls' sports. This places our state on a collision course with the federal Title IX requirements, and more importantly, raises real concerns about the fairness and safety for our daughters and our granddaughters and your sisters. House File 1233 provides clarity. We never thought we needed clarity before, but here we are today. And we have a responsibility to protect future female athletes, our daughters, our granddaughters, our sisters, to provide fairness in girls' sports, to uphold the intent of Title IX, and to ensure Minnesota is in compliance with a 50-year-old law. It's a 50-year-old federal law. Many other states are clarifying things too. This has been a cherished law by both sides of the aisle, and all of a sudden, in 2026, it's political. Members, I ask for your support to clarify the Human Rights Act, to put clarity and definition so that we are not losing federal funding and we are not losing the right for Title IX. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Freeborn, Representative Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm just going to share from the heart for a minute. And I've shared this story before, but this means a lot to me, what we're discussing right now. And I've shared this when I was a high school senior. It was the first year that we girls had the opportunity to compete in girls' sports. And specifically for me, it was girls' basketball. Prior to that, it was not available. So I was part of the generation of girls and women that finally realized that we had our own sports. And I remember clearly hearing little snippets. Obviously, as a teenager, we don't listen to politics very much, but I can remember that, just to talk about, hey, we're going to have girls' sports. Because we knew we couldn't compete against the boys. We can't compete against male bodies. And I know my life would be very different had I not had the opportunity to compete in girls' basketball. I was very shy then. I'd come out of my parents' divorce from a few years ago, was in a new school, and kind of just lived in my own shell. And being part of that sports team, a girls' team, helped me get the skills and the strength and courage to just come out of my shell and be who I was. And I appreciate that opportunity. And I want every girl to have that opportunity. This isn't about polls, 80-20, not just that. It's not about necessarily the laws that we as a legislature make. This is a right and a wrong issue. It's a basic biology issue. It goes back to the creation of human beings who were created male and female. We in this legislature, in this body, we can get laws wrong. We're not perfect, obviously, and I'm speaking my side of the aisle, your side of the aisle, everybody's side. We're human. We can make wrong laws, and we have some wrong laws in Minnesota right now. But the right thing to do at this time is to bring this bill forward and make sure our girls in school understand that they can be safe, that they can compete against female bodies and not have to worry about the stronger physiological muscles, all those things that we heard that make competition unfair for girls. So I want to say I support this bill. I hope we'll bring it to the floor right now for a vote and tell all the girls in Minnesota that we support them, that we love them, and that we'll do the right thing. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Ramsey, Representative Moeller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm hearing conversations about this bill, and my colleagues across the aisle say that you are bringing this to protect women and girls, and that couldn't be further from the truth. The real threat to women and girls is sexual assault, gender-based violence, and when it comes from the leadership at the top of this country, it sends a message that that type of violence against women and girls is okay. We have a president who has bragged about sexual assault, who has been found liable by a jury for sexual assault.
Point of parliamentary inquiry, Madam Speaker.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What order of business are we on?
Members, the order of business that we are on is a suspension of rules for House File 2685. Representative Moeller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And my comments are directly in relation to yours because you're talking about wanting to protect your daughters and your sisters and your granddaughters. And I find that really ironic, again, when we have a president who bragged about sexual assault, who is found liable by a jury of sexual abuse, who has dozens of accusers. He bragged about going backstage during beauty pageants while women were changing. I heard somebody over there say it's really don't want their girls when they're changing to be exposed. Our president did that. He surrounds himself with alleged abusers. He removed sexual assault training from the military. He has frozen funds for the Office of Violence Against Women. He's limited protections for these kinds of crimes on college campuses. He's named thousands of times in the Epstein's files, Epstein being his best friend. And he has given disgusting names to journalists, saying things like Quiet Piggy.
Madam Speaker, point of parliamentary procedure.
State your point of parliamentary procedure.
What particular motion is on the floor and what particular debate is under House rules are we supposed to be debating, Madam Speaker?
Your point of order. Members, as a reminder, we are on the suspension of rules for House File 2685. Members, please keep your comments directed to the matter in front of us. Representative Moeller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I think I made it through my list of items to prove my point that if you really want to protect women and girls, you would care about the things that I just listed. Those are the things that are enabling sexual assault and gender-based violence in this country. And I'll note that victims who are LGBTQ+ are more likely to be victims of sexual assault and domestic violence and other types of gender-based crimes. So if we really cared about protecting women and girls, that is what we would care about. Members vote no.
I recognize the member from Meeker, Representative Gilman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I am a sports mom, and I'm very grateful for that. I've got 5 kids. I myself was quite the avid basketball player that supported women's basketball, girls basketball at DC. Where you'd find me is sitting at the end of the bench, but I was quite supportive there. But what I do want to talk about is 1 in 3 girls. We're talking about different things and protections around women's sports. This bill does not exclude anyone in the state of Minnesota from playing sports. I started a grassroots movement back in 2020 to encourage and get back sports for kids called Let Them Play Minnesota. Our kids were shuttered in place, and they were political pawns to our governor's agenda at the time to use our children and what was going on in our nation as for benefits that I won't even go into because this doesn't have to do with this bill. But I will say this. There is a place for everyone to play sports in Minnesota, and simply this is just about ensuring equality for girls. Being a bench warmer basketball player taught me many valuable things and helped ensure that I had a safe place to call home. Again, I had a single mom at the time, and it was a place where I got to work through adversity, frustration, learn how to go to our coach and ask why. Why didn't I get more playing time? Why was I not seeing the court? And the facts were the facts. There were better players out there than me. There were players that are now sitting on the Hall of Fame at Dassel-Cokato High School that I helped get there because I played my tail off in practice. Again, when the spotlight came on and it was time to go out and play, I did not have the level that they had. They helped us win games. I helped in a different way. And what we are doing here, people, is we're saying, girls, your value and your worth is not there. You don't get to have safe spaces. When I talk about safe spaces, I can't imagine what I would have felt like as a young teenager having a biological male changing in my locker room. With the things that I was going through and the things I'd been exposed to, it was would have been very traumatic for me personally. But I'm gonna talk to you about Kendall. Kendall Kotzmacher, she got to play in the state tournament this summer that we've probably all heard about. And there was an article posted by Alpha News, and it just says here, Minnesota softball players cheated out of state tournament, speaks out about trans pitcher. I'm gonna just tell you a few of her quotes here in this, because it's very powerful. Kendall said that there's so many girls that did so many amazing things that whole tournament, and all anyone could talk about was Champlin. We upset the 3 seed of the whole tournament, and right after the game, it was like, you get to play Champlin now, and that talk was all about the biological male being on the team. Kendall also went on to say, I think of me and other women, and it makes us feel like we don't matter. And obviously, playing a biological male is not something I ever thought would happen in my lifetime. So going there and seeing that, it was like everyone was supporting Champlin, and it just kind of felt like we were being pushed aside. She went on to say it hurts a lot. Obviously, softball is growing into such a big sport at the collegiate level, and now a new pro league. And Title IX paved the way for this and for us. They set the tone and they set the standard for younger generations, such as myself, to see this now being ignored. It just shows that a biological male can come in and take away everything we've worked through. And for all these years, it's so heartbreaking. At the college level, I won't have to deal with this personally because of the new law that was put into place. But the younger generations, it's not something I want them to have ever to experience. And I have a 10-year-old cousin and a coach that coaches the 10-year-old team. And again, she goes on to talk about her experience and just how emotional it is for them. So when we say there's no problem here, it depends on what people call problems. Again, like we can look at something from many different lenses here in this place, and I'm grateful. There's things that I've learned being in this role representing 40-some thousand people that don't vote the same way that I do. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I've been able to lock arms with people across the aisle to get things done. I have also been very frustrated because we get discounted at times because it doesn't align with something that was thrown through when there was a Democrat trifecta here. Another message I got from a mom, a concerned mom, sent me a message, and she said, I get so frustrated. They claim that Republicans are taking away women's rights when in reality, that's exactly what they're doing. I have a girl athlete, and I'm so thankful that her softball team did not have to deal with the issue many of the other softball teams had to. This isn't about being disrespectful. I'm not standing here to be mean or disheartening or the word bigoted. Hearing that word is so frustrating to me because that's not what we're here for. We are here to ensure, again, that women and girls have equality. The simple fact that you have to use the word trans female, that is a different definition than what I grew up with. Then the majority of us that grew up in this room did not know any different. So again, this bill, again, is because we love our kids, and there's so much opportunity. The Minnesota State High School League adapted. Things changed in 2020 and 2021. We collectively pushed back at the governor's, all his orders that he had. We pushed back collectively, as a state and said, no, this is not going to work. We're talking about, we just went over his budget today. We're going to push back. We can do that. We're legislators. And this is our body and this is our chamber. Again, I'm gonna just say this here quick. When we have sports medicine physicians, endocrinologists, and pediatricians that put on record that you cannot change things by just inducing hormones, that will not give males an advantage, tell folks like Kendall, you know, I had parents calling me going, please, Dawn, do something. What can we do? I had so many phone calls during that time. And that type of adversity I didn't have to live through. I lived through different types of adversity. But again, the Minnesota State High School League, we could collectively get a working group together. That's what people like to do around here, is get working groups and get reports and do all these things. We could get a working group together and let's find a solution. Let's rattle the cage and go, hey, Minnesota State High School League, let's talk about co-ed leagues. Do you know that in Minnesota, the girls wrestling, how it started, what's been happening with that, and how fantastic it is that girls get to compete at a level together, and they've started a movement here, and it's been so fun to watch and learn about. But why don't we get together and come up with a solution so that this isn't the fight? Our grandmas fought for equality. Thank God. You know, hearing Representative Bennett's story is powerful. Thank you for sharing that again. What have I, the oldest of 3 girls to a divorced mom, a survivor of my own sorts from when I was young, have been in the same locker room as a biological male, going through the trauma I was going through? I can say that's a heck no. I would not have done that. It would have not been a safe space. And it's not because I don't care for people that are struggling or comfortable with their gender identity. And if I'm saying it right or wrong, I'm saying people are saying there's not a problem here. There's serious concerns. And if we can't get curious about it and try to come up with a solution, why can't we have co-ed leagues? Why can't we do that? Why can't we do things like that? Other states are finding solutions. I think Minnesota could get on board with this bill, and we could do good things, and it'd be better for many girls out there. So thanks so much.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Cagle.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. So as the mom of a 7-year-old girl, I teach my daughter to treat every person with love and acceptance. Maybe that's just, how I was brought up. But we always go towards other people with open arms. And I think that's super important. When I was in high school, girls were playing on the football team. And I really think that you're setting a false narrative saying that these aren't safe spaces. There's a lot of people in this room that I wouldn't want to even, be in an office with, let alone, that's just a false narrative, and saying that trans athletes are making people uncomfortable is just ridiculous. And once again, we're talking about 1% of the population. 1% of people identify as trans. 1%. And do you think, so how many high schoolers do you think are actually identifying as trans? It's not like it's an easy thing to do. It's not like, people are saying, oh, we welcome you, because we see here on the floor right now that that's not happening. And if we really want to keep girls safe, we would be talking about the 40 million women that live in Iran, and the 3 million girls under 4 years old that are under threat of being bombed by a psychopath tonight. That's right. You guys should be on the phone calling your congresspeople saying, please, stop this madness. That's what would help keep girls and women safe. This is silly. This is ridiculous. And I'm sorry we're doing this.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I have a lot of thoughts here, so I'll try and keep it short. So one of the concerns raised, well, first we just heard that this is silly and ridiculous. And I'm stunned that that is how some of our colleagues feel about protecting women and girls sports and the girls in our state. And as the mom of 3 daughters, I don't find it silly and ridiculous at all. I am so grateful my kids are out of high school and they got to play girls sports and be safe and be able to compete fairly. And that is not what we're seeing in real time across our state. Someone else said that there's no urgency. Well, members, a year ago, we were having this fight. And on June 6th of 2025, that is when the Champlain Park softball team won with a male pitcher. And so if we would have done this last year, we might not have had that situation. And so it is urgent as we think about the girls who are competing this spring, and we absolutely need to take this seriously. That pitcher in Champlain Park, they won the Class 4A championship. I know because this affected my district. And this person pitched 14 shutout innings back to back. That's because of their strength and their endurance, and there just are differences between biology. As chair of the fraud committee, the one thing I've learned, well, I've learned a lot, but one of the things I've learned is that we create problems for our state when we do not tell the truth. And this is another example of that. When we are not willing to say that males and females are different, which is true, then we end up creating problems in our state. And I want to just be on the side of speaking truth. Males and females are different, and we should respect that, and we should make sure that girls can compete safely. I loved Representative Bennett's story about being able to finally play basketball. I'm a little bit younger, and I didn't have that experience, but my mom and my aunt were not able to play sports in high school. And when my sister and I were able to play sports, they were thrilled. They were the biggest supporters because we were the first generation to get that opportunity that they hadn't had. And I can't imagine that just a generation later, we are going back on that for the women and girls in our state. It's stunning to me. And I know it's not what I supported as that Champlain Park championship happened last year. My phone was ringing off the hook from girls in my district, families in my district who had lost out on the opportunity to play, and on just how heartbreaking it was for them to have worked 4 whole years, all these kids who had gone through so much with COVID and all these things, and then they felt like their championship was taken away. It was really heartbreaking. But I want to share also about a girl in New England who this has been her experience. She has lost, she's a track runner, and she has lost, and this is an article she wrote, I've lost 4 women's state championship titles, 2 All-New England awards, and numerous other sports spots on the podium for male runners. I was bumped to 3rd place in the 55-meter dash back in 2019 behind 2 male runners. It gets harder and harder to keep trying again. And I think that's what we're facing, members. We are not only putting girls at risk because of the biological differences, we are putting girls at risk because of the psychological trauma of having to change and be in front of boys in a locker room situation. But we are also putting them at risk because of how hard they work to compete and excel at their sport, and then to be facing an opponent they know biologically they just cannot beat. It just wears them down. There's a group called the American College of Sports Medicine, and this is how they describe the differences. Biological sex is primary determinant of athletic performance because of fundamental sex differences in anatomy and physiology dictated by the sex chromosomes and sex hormones. Adult men are typically stronger, more powerful, and faster than women of similar ages and training statuses. Thus, for athletic events and sports relying on endurance, muscle strength, speed, and power, males typically outperform females by 10 to 30%, depending on the requirements of the event. These sex differences in performance emerge with the onset of puberty and coincide with the increase in endogenous sex steroid hormones, in particular testosterone in males, which increases 30-fold by adulthood, but remains low in female. So this is not targeting anyone, this is not mean, this is just facing biological reality and wanting to give the girls in our state the same opportunities that our generation had. For about 1.5 generations, maybe 2 generations, we had girls' sports. And we need to protect that hard-won ground so our girls can compete and excel and have the confidence and the opportunities that we had. We don't want to look back and say, we're the generation that lost that for our kids and grandkids. So members, this makes sense. It is an urgency. It's rooted in biological reality, and we need to do the right thing for women and girls in Minnesota. Thank you.
I recognize the member from St. Louis, Representative Kozlowski.
Thank you, Speaker Demuth and members. Heard a lot in this conversation about simple facts. Simple facts like it's common sense biological sex categories. But the fact of the matter is that I'm standing before you as a trans, non-binary, two-spirit person who apparently doesn't exist in this bill. Also, word to everybody is that everything is made up. Every single word that is used in this English language as we know it today is literally made up. So it makes sense that you don't have the language that was invented, and I love it, and that's a gift that we get to be creative. But the idea that there is this like fixed gender, common sense, biological sex, I was on a call yesterday with a national group of Native Americans who are 4 other two-spirit people, and we were all talking about how gender binary was brought to these lands, yeah, right there, super kindly given away, right? That's a simple fact too, if you go by the words up there. That gender binary is a colonial export and not an immutable global truth. We do exist and have existed since time immemorial. Simple facts, like I heard data reference to March 2026. Well, that's also the same time when a new study came out, and it shows that 4 in 10 Americans just so happen to know a trans person. And not just know them, love them, you know, call them neighbor, call them coworker, call them small business owner in your community, hilarious comedians, doctors in our communities. And that 85% of people across all political affiliations, this new research shows, not that we follow polls, but that they agree. The fundamental premise that every single human being, including trans, two-spirit, and non-binary people, deserve access to health care, to live in public life, and to have a future that is worthy of them and free of discrimination. We heard it say, protect the girls, and I couldn't agree more. I say protect the dolls too. And it's great because we can finally agree on something, that trans girls are girls, so protect the girls. That trans boys are boys, so protect the boys too. Non-binary kids are non-binary kids. They exist. I've always existed in the flesh. That two-spirit kids are two-spirit kids, and adult two-spirits, well, I'll just say we're too sacred. And only the natives will understand that. But in all seriousness, if we really want to protect women and girls, then we'd do what they're asking and we'd invest in them. And we'd invest in sports, and we'd be able to name more than just one of them. I would challenge you to, can you name 10 women's sports teams, or have you gone to 10 women's sports games? There's a ton in Minnesota, that's great. And I was thinking this weekend, because I've been paying a ton of attention to the legendary black coach from South Carolina who did take the L but showed how to take it with grace and with power. And that's Don Staley. And I'll say that as a soccer player, as a broomball player, basketball, all these things that you're talking about, in places that it sounds like the real culprit that we're afraid of is nothing to do with trans kids or trans girls. But I think these players would frankly be a little offended at the way that, a basketball player is described here, a hockey player. I mean, hockey players and girls, women's sports are rugged and dominant and strong and mighty. And likewise, in my high school growing up, we had our girls and non-binary kids playing on the men's football team. And I can tell you, they took a sack just and could hit one just the same as anybody else. So let's not undermine them. But I agree with these premier women's athletes, with these premier women's coaches, in the words of Don Staley, to all the trans girls, the trans women, and trans non-binary kids out there, you should play. An adult should get out of your way. And I'll just wrap it up by saying, for me personally, I didn't have a lot of people to look up to in sports growing up as a non-binary kid. And I'm really grateful that we have our first Olympic trans non-binary out athlete at all. Shout out to the they, thems. And Nikki Hiltz, said what Representative Finke has already said. You're not solving a problem. This is manufactured issue that just does not exist, but we do. And I'll just leave it that the real people who are preying on our women and girls is the men like Donald Trump and the Epstein files, who have an insatiable hunger for our kids, particularly for Black, brown, and indigenous kids and women, and who have now taken this colonial empire of violence across the globe just as soon as after they exported these gender binaries here and put that on us, going across the nation, costing every single American with every day $3 out of their pocket. So yeah, I think we should get serious, protect the girls, protect the boys, protect our women and men, protect our futures, and vote no to this terrible motion.
I recognize a member from Goodhue, Representative Altendorf.
Members, thank you, Representative Knudsen, for bringing this forward for us to vote on today. This is common sense, and 80% of the public stands with us. Today, the Republicans in this House chamber stand with Minnesota girls. We stand with Minnesota girls for their safety. We stand with Minnesota girls for their protection. We stand with Minnesota girls for fairness. Our aunts, mothers, grandmothers fought for Title IX. And thank God they did, because that gave girls the right to play and to have the opportunity to compete in sports, something that had never happened before. So feminists, where are you today? Where are you? The Minnesota Republicans in this House stand with Minnesota girls. Feminists, where are you? This is an 80% issue. And this is not about, we are not going to put men's feelings over girls' protections.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
State your point of order.
House Rule 2.31, offensive words in debate. This has gone long enough without being addressed today on the floor. The comments being made about trans girls and trans women are highly transphobic, and I would ask that members confine their remarks specifically to bills without using transphobic language, including calling women and girls boys and pretending they don't exist. Thank you.
Members, we are on the motion, suspension of the rules for House File 2685. Please keep your comments related to this motion. Representative Altendorf.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, today we are not going to put men's feelings over protecting our girls in the state of Minnesota. It is good to see that the Olympics...
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
State your point of order.
Same point of order, House Rule 2.31, offensive words in debate. It is highly offensive. It is transphobic to continue to refer to girls and women as men. I would ask that the Speaker find that it is inappropriate to do so on the floor and direct members to discontinue transphobic remarks. Thank you.
As a reminder, members, we are on the suspension of rules for House File 2685. Please keep your comments related to the suspension of rules for House File 2685. Representative Altendorf.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Again, we stand here today, the Minnesota Republicans, to protect girls, to protect their safety, to make fairness, to bring fairness back to girls' sports, which is lacking. It is good to see that the Olympics have moved to make this back fair for women. It's also good to see that the federal government is looking to protect girls in the Title IX. So progress is being made. Meanwhile, here in the state of Minnesota, we are choosing what happened under a Democrat trifecta, an 80% issue, which 80% of Minnesotans stand strongly, firmly with the Minnesota Republicans on this issue. Members, we can solve this. We can solve this if you do not want to have boys' sports and girls' sports. What about we just erase it all? What would happen? What would happen if we just did not have any gender sports? And you know, every sport would be dominated by males. Girls would not have an opportunity to compete, and that is why Title IX was created in the first place, to give an equal opportunity for girls to compete. We already talked about the physical differences, that men have more lung capacity, more strength, more size. Members, today is not about feelings. It is not about what they think is political correctness or wokeness. Today is about our Minnesota girls in this state, and the Minnesota House Republicans are standing up for them in this chamber. Thank you, Representative Knudsen.
I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Hanson J.
Thank you, Speaker. Fellow feminists here, we are absolutely in the House. I think it's important to remember what feminism is before we just throw that term around here. It's for the equality of all people, meaning that we want all people to be treated as equals, not just some. So my comments will be brief here, but you know, when the justification for a motion is to protect girls and promote equity, it's really hard to take that seriously when we live in an America that's being promoted to ignore Epstein, ignore Lazaro, ignore a 26,000% increase in child sexual abuse material that's AI generated, because what demand is that supply meeting? Let's be honest about that. In an America where we have the SAVE Act, where if you Google what does the SAVE Act do, AI will not even
Point of parliamentary inquiry,
right
Madam Speaker.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What does the Save America Act have to do with House File 2685?
As a reminder, members, we're on the suspension of rules for House File 2685. Please keep your comments related to that motion. Representative Hanson J.
Thank you, Speaker. And as a reminder, I'm speaking on the justification for the motion before us as I've heard it presented. I've heard it presented that, and I said it's hard for me to understand the justification for the motion as it's being presented because we live in an America where, fill in the blank. Hope you're following, Representative Schultz. So, back to it. It's also hard to understand and take that seriously when I work in a body where, as a woman, I watch women every day here not be treated as equals. I watch women be spoken over. I watch women be told we can't talk as much. I watch women be interrupted. I watch women with gavels not get to earn the respect that this institution has shown everyone with gavels for a long time. It's also hard to believe when we live in a version of America where, the president isn't even safe for women and kids, nor any role model that I would like to...
Speaker.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
What point of business are we on?
Members, we are on the suspension of rules for House File 2685. Please keep your comments related to the motion that we are on. Representative Hanson-Jay.
Thank you, Speaker. Again, I will reiterate my comments are in response to the justification that's being used from the people making it about this motion and how I'm struggling to understand that that's sincere. And I would welcome anyone to challenge any of these points about that. So I hope we can have a good debate about that. But it is hard to understand that the justification for this motion, when we're living in an America where, our kids are not safe in a lot of spaces. And women, for folks watching, this is an echoey chamber. You may not always pick up on the microphone, but we can hear you when we're talking. Let's just be honest then. Let's be honest that while Minnesotans are struggling to make ends meet, while Minnesotans are calling for action on gun violence prevention, while Minnesotans expect politicians to do their jobs, what are we prioritizing? The motion before us right now is not about what I'm hearing from constituents about. It's not about what my constituents are asking me to prioritize. It's not the high priority issues that any of us hear about on the doors most often. And I just think it's really clear, and Minnesotans should know that some of us are honestly here to do the work and not perform in just a political theater back and forth. Some people are just here to politicize people's existence in what I will honestly say is a bit of an odd and creepy, obsessive sort of way, because it's been going on for a really long time, where we have children who are already struggling to feel like they are included, struggling to feel like they belong, struggling to not face the pains of what it feels like to feel suicidal when you are treated like you don't belong, with grown-ups in decision-making places like this who ignore that their rhetoric matters. And it matters and it affects kids. That does not make children safe. Some of us are really here to get work done. We saw last week, some of us just want to give up and go home. But with motions like this before us, it's really hard to believe that while some of us are here to pass thorough, funded, effective policies about things people care about, like fraud prevention, to combat that, some people are really honestly doing everything in their power to block it and make a spectacle of it, as if to mock Minnesotans' concerns. The actual concerns we hear about on the doors, the actual concerns we hear in our inboxes. So let's just stop playing with people's emotions here, right? Let's just be clear that some of us are actually here to work. Some of us are here to be respectful to all Minnesotans, no matter who they are. Some of us are here to understand the impact of our rhetoric as it will land in a child's mind and heart. That matters to some of us. Some of us happen to care what a child takes away from a conversation like this. And other people are just out of touch with the issues that truly matter to Minnesotans and are really just here to play politics and are really unaware, and some people just maybe just don't care how that rhetoric lands with some kids or how it lands with people. So I hope the public knows that while one side of the aisle here is ready to get real work done, we would love to move this motion along at any moment. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Crow Wing, Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. I have high hope today that this urgency will be recognized and we will protect girls' sports in Minnesota, but I have a feeling that this motion will fail. And although there is all kinds of discussion about what is being heard at doors and what's not being heard, the reality is this is an 80-20 issue. And the reality is also that apparently there's a large group of folks that aren't listening to the 70 to 80% of Minnesotans that are saying, fix this. I'm the father of 3 daughters, and I'm very proud to stand and speak for them today and for the many constituents that have spoken to me about this issue and continue to write emails and continue to call and text me and say, how can this not get fixed? My daughters are volleyball players. We've heard from basketball players and wrestlers, girls that just want to be able to participate. Representative Bennett, your story has been mentioned by a number of members who were very impacted by that. I'm another member that was impacted by that story. The story of our grandmothers who didn't get to have an opportunity to play sports. And in this modern society, at least here in Minnesota, Democrats are standing in the way of this issue coming to the floor. I hope Minnesotans are watching and see who is standing in the way of protecting girls' sports today. Republicans are ready to get this finished, get this done today, right now. I was visiting with my daughters over the Easter break, and this issue actually came up. This is in the news, this is in stories and social media constantly, especially as the Olympic Committee made their decision, recognizing the lunacy of this not getting resolved and fixing it finally. At the Olympic level, I believe I read 26 or 27 other states have already passed legislation protecting girls' sports. Yet here we are today, and Democrats say, nope, can't have that conversation. We're going to stand against recognizing the urgency of this issue and are not going to allow us to pass this protection for our girls. I mentioned my girls are volleyball players. They all watch in horror as they see girls being injured as they're forced to play with much stronger players than themselves. And we can stare into our laptops and into our cell phones and ignore the fact that this is happening on the other side of the aisle. It's unreal, quite honestly, for us to watch this. This issue is not going to go away. Minnesotans are going to continue to stand and say, no, we will push this issue and protect our girls' sports. And I stand with them. Representative Gilman, I also thought that was a tremendous example you offered, and you read the stories of these young ladies that have been so negatively impacted. My daughters are rooting for you today. Thank you. They're texting me saying thanks. I'll just share that with you. We absolutely must fix this sooner than later. So I had to speak today. I wasn't going to, but when I hear the debate, it's just, quite honestly, it's very discouraging. Like I said, I had hope that this urgency would be recognized and that we'd be able to vote on this bill. I hope that members see how important this is and that the stories that are being told are resonating with those on the other side of the aisle. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Lee X.
Thank you, Speaker. Today I'm hearing that we want to protect, we want to be there for our Minnesota girls. So let's do it. Let's do it for all of them. All Minnesota girls. And that's why I'm urging members to vote no on this ban, because you're banning girls if you're voting yes for this bill. And why are we focusing on biological, physiological differences? You talk about muscle structure. You talk about physical features, bone density. What about academics? What about their mental acuity? What about their sports history? Do they come from a legacy, a family who's played softball or any other sport for generations? What kind of advantages do those girls have over other girls? How come we're not focusing on that? Why? Why are we just focusing on physical differences? Sure, they play a part in competition, but just like we've heard earlier from the other side, every girl has a role to play. Whether you're on the practice squad or whether you're varsity, whether you come in first place or second place, whether you are the title or the record holder, or whether your record gets broken. So if we're going to stand up for Minnesota girls, let's stand up for all Minnesota girls. And then to that point, let me share a couple words from a CCX article that was from last year, because this is a controversial issue. The school board met, and this is what a teammate said. Despite all the hate and outside noise our team had endured, we stuck together and continued to play as not just teammates, but as family, said Reese Reimler, a Champlain Park softball player. Our team's accomplishment is truly a reflection on everyone's combined efforts and relentless training. And then a parent told the board that suggesting that the championship wasn't earned, quote, because we happen to have a transgender player, is not only unfounded, but also deeply dismissive of the team's hard work, talent, and skills. So I urge members to vote no and go Rebels.
I recognize the member from Todd, Representative Weiner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I find it repugnant that the other side downplays the seriousness of this issue. How dare you treat our daughters this way? This bill is about fairness. We teach it to our kids, we expect it in our workplace, and kids learn fairness in sports. where rules exist for one simple reason: to create a level playing field. We can and should treat every person with dignity. That's not the issue. The question is whether it's fair, safe, or just to allow biological boys to compete in girls' sports. When you look at the facts, at biology, at performance data, and the purpose of women's athletics, the answer is clear. Before puberty, we look at facts, or before puberty, boys and girls are relatively similar in athletic performance. But once puberty begins, significant physiological differences emerge due to testosterone. As mentioned before, greater muscle mass, 30 to 40% more in the upper body, higher bone density, larger heart and lung capacity, faster reaction times, higher hemoglobin levels, which improve oxygen delivery. And these aren't small differences, they're fundamental advantages. So even after testosterone suppression, studies show that many of the advantages are only partially reduced, not eliminated. Muscle structure, bone size, and cardiovascular capacity don't simply reset. That's why we separate sports by sex in the first place. We're doing this not to exclude, but to ensure fairness. Differences aren't theological, it's measurable, it's consistent nearly across every sport. Track and field elite male athletes outperform the female athletes by roughly 10 to 12% in running events. In strength sports, the gap's even larger, roughly 30%. High school athletics, boys frequently exceed girls' Olympic level performances in comparable events. So to put it simply, thousands of male athletes outperform the best female athletes in the world. It's not simply about training harder. That's not the effect. It's about biology, and it's about fairness. Title IX was passed to ensure that girls and women had equal opportunity in sports. Opportunities that had long been denied, like what was discussed earlier. Thank you, Representative Bennett. It created a space for female athletes to compete, to earn scholarships, to build confidence, and to succeed. But if biological males are allowed to compete in female categories, these opportunities erode. We've already seen it, girls losing championships, losing roster spots, losing scholarship opportunities, and stepping away from sports altogether. When one athlete has a biological advantage, it doesn't just affect a single match or a race, it affects every competitor in that field. And there's also the safety issue. In contact sports, size and strength differ greatly. We've seen injuries occur when female athletes compete against larger, stronger opponents. Even in non-contact sports, the differences are stark. So let's be clear about this. The conversation is not about excluding anyone from sports. Everyone should have the opportunity to compete, but inclusion cannot come at the cost of fairness. We understand this principle in other areas. We've got weight classes in boxing, age division in youth sports, skill levels in competition. Why? Because fairness matters. And sex-based categories exist for the same reason. We can respect individuals while also protecting women's sports. Ensuring policies that are grounded in science, not ideology. It's not about choosing one group over another. It's about recognizing that different groups have different needs. And fairness requires acknowledging reality. Do we value the integrity of women's sports? Do we believe that female athletes deserve a fair chance to compete, to win, and to succeed based on their own abilities? I believe so. Sports teach us discipline, they teach us teamwork, they teach us perseverance, and above all, they teach us fairness. If we lose that, if we ignore the very differences that sport categories were designed to address, then we risk undermining everything women's sports were built to achieve. We can be compassionate, we can be respectful, but we also have to be honest. Biology matters. Fairness matters, and protecting girls' sports matter. Thank you for bringing this bill forward. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to protect my little girls when it comes to sports. It is shocking to hear what we've heard from the other side of this aisle. Vote yes.
I recognize a member from Hennepin, Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Jeez. Here we are again. Many thoughts. You know, I heard, we haven't grown up with this issue, and it's this urgency, but actually, gender identity has been protected in the Minnesota Human Rights Act since 1993. So if you're under 50-ish or so and live in Minnesota, you've dealt with having trans people protected in our Human Rights Act. Why is this an urgency? Why is this such a big issue now? It seems like perhaps is it trying to distract from the war crimes that our President and Secretary of War are about to commit? Or could it be that you don't want to talk about affordability or protecting kids from guns or protecting our communities from ICE? Minnesotans, when you hear this trans issue brought up, you have to ask the question why, because we've had this discussion over and over again. You know, if we're going to talk about trans people, then let's talk about the fact that 1 in 4 have been physically attacked because of their gender identity, and 2/3 have been verbally attacked. We're talking about high school sports. Let's take a step back and look at the purpose of pre-college athletics. From the National Federation of State High School Associations, athletics are integral to the American education system because they have educational value. By participating in athletics, young people have the opportunity to learn, grow, and develop just as they do in the classroom. When students were asked why they participate, the answer was often like this: I participate on my high school team because they're more than just my team, they're my family, and I don't know where I'd be today without them. Why shouldn't trans kids have this opportunity? They have in Minnesota since 1993, and we've been okay. I think about these issues as a parent, and I received an email from a parent of a trans kid in my district who said the following: the real purpose of these kinds of bills is to marginalize all trans athletes. It is vital to mental health and affirming to be able to play on a team that reflects your chosen gender, which we've been doing since 1993. It's a trap to say that trans women pose a safety risk or have an unfair advantage to other athletes. There will always be all sorts of body types, regardless of gender. And actually, this is likely to hurt any cis woman that is blessed by being tall or more muscular, as they'll be scrutinized for their true gender. No one would choose to go through the trials of becoming trans just to get an advantage in sports. I mean, come on. There are very few athletes that are trans, and the ones that are just trying to live an authentic life. And then she sent me some comments from her trans kid. My outlook on life has grown substantially more positive, and I can see myself being a part of society in the future, whereas before I could not. Should I have not been able to transition, it would not have truly been me. I have a right to happiness and life, a real and full life, just as everyone else gets to have. Minnesota, When we hear these issues, we have to remember there's other things that they don't want to be talking about. Vote no.
I recognize a member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Knudsen, and I appreciate the members who've spoken in support of this motion, in part because my own mother was a part of that first generation to have their own space, for women to compete in sports all to their own. She had the chance to play basketball in my hometown, the place where generations of my family have lived and graduated from. And for these last 50 years, or approximately there so, that's been a good thing. And to this question raised about how recent is this impacting Minnesota kids, this policy was adopted by the State High School League in 2014 and implemented in 2015. And I think that just like many other policies, it's very likely that circumstances around a conversation like this take time for us to feel the impacts of bad decisions. And when I think about what we need to do to create safe spaces for future generations of Minnesota girls, there is nothing more important. And so to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who are asking this question, are you hearing about this? This is top of mind in my own community. I literally have over a dozen school board members from multiple different school districts who have signed on to a letter and have taken positions in their own school district saying exactly what we're trying to say today, which is that in athletics, the people who are competing should be those who are biological women by the way that they were born at birth. And that is something that we all know is incredibly popular because it's the right thing to do. That's why the federal government has taken the action that they have. It's why we're having this conversation today. Because we'll be in session here for the next 6 weeks, and at the same time, this lawsuit hangs out in the air over Minnesota because of the decisions and the crisis that Democrats have put us in, by the things that were put into law by Democrats. And so that carries a price tag, right? The lawsuit mentions that Minnesota kids could lose out on $3 billion of federal funding because of violations of Title IX. But it's not just the federal government who has this concern and actually priority to ensure that women and girls have spaces to compete on a level and fair playing field. But in fact, it's the International Olympic Committee that has taken actions to ensure this level of fairness in sports. So for us, how can we stand here and see this crisis that has been created by state government and say that this isn't anything less than an emergent issue that must be addressed right now, today, which is why I encourage all of our support to suspend the rules to bring up House File 2685.
I recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Lee Kay.
Thank you, Speaker. I rise to also urge members to vote no on the motion and to tell the story of Congresswoman Patsy Takemoto-Mink, the author of Title IX. We've heard a lot about what Title IX is, but I think a lot of folks actually don't understand the full extent of what Title IX was meant to be. It's important to tell her story because the bill that Congresswoman Mink worked so hard to get passed is being misused today, and it's most importantly being misused by an administration that is not serious about protecting women or girls. Title IX is a landmark bill that bans sex discrimination in education programs for both staff and students, including the prohibition of sexual harassment. It was passed by Congresswoman Mink, who had two formative experiences that inspired her to dedicate her life to combating race and gender discrimination. Born and raised in Hawaii, she was not allowed to play in the high school basketball team. Historically, because only the boys had been allowed to play in the team before. She was told to play volleyball. Later, she was denied admission to medical school because she was a girl. That forced her to apply to law school instead, and that's how she became a congresswoman. Congresswoman Mink was also the first Asian American to run for president. She had two goals: put a spotlight on anti-war efforts because she felt the war in Vietnam was not receiving enough attention or consideration in the presidential race, and challenge sexist stereotypes that only men could run for president of the United States. Understanding Congresswoman Mink's story is important because if she were alive today, her goal would be to just let the kids play, because that's a fundamental right that she was denied, just to play. Her argument to her principal was that being a girl did not matter. She could play basketball just as good as the guys, and when she applied to be a doctor, she knew she would be just as good or even better than the male doctors at the University of Chicago. She would also tell us that the other side of Title IX has failed all students, as litigation throughout the decades has narrowed the scope of Title IX's protections against sexual assault, which is actually a real threat for girls. A 2025 analysis of data from 2015 to 2022 found that college-enrolled women aged 18 to 24 had a 74% higher risk of sexual violence compared to women of the same age not attending college. We can't trust this administration when they claim they are fighting to protect women. For the first time in over 60 years, the US gender pay gap has widened for consecutive years, with women working full-time in 2024 earning just 81 cents for every dollar compared to men. This is down from 84 cents in 2022. The gap grew because men's median income increased faster than women's median income, which remains stagnant in this economy. But instead, we know that the chief of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or the EEOC, is focusing instead on protecting white men. Using her official EEOC Twitter accounts and communications channels, which are huge platforms, she's broadcasted that the goal of the EEOC is now to pursue cases to defend white men who have been discriminated against in the workplace. This administration can't be taken seriously when they claim that they want to protect women, when one of the most important things is economic independence. So colleagues, there is no urgency here. If there is an urgency, it's to protect our students, it's to protect the women who are working just as hard, maybe twice as hard as men, to bring home so that they can feed their families and pay rent. And so I urge a no vote. Thanks.
I recognize the member from Crow Wing, Representative Davis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill that we're discussing with the suspension of the rules, House File 2685, is about protecting girls in sports from biological males, much stronger than them, competing against them, potentially hurting them. That's what this bill is about. And we got told over and over, no, that's not what this bill is about. In fact, this bill actually hurts girls, is what we told. Right is left, up is down. Seems to always be the case on this House floor, or many times it is. I know what this bill is about. We know what this bill is about. It's about protecting our girls from having men in their locker rooms, from having men competing against them and potentially hurting them in sports. That's what this bill is about. That's what truth is. In Minnesota, this is an 80-20 issue for you, and you have House Democrats tonight saying your fears aren't real. Your fears don't exist. You also, tonight, Minnesotans, have Democrats on the House floor deciding for you what words mean. And I'm here to tell you, Minnesota and Madam Speaker, that you're not the God of words and what they mean. What I'm hearing tonight, this is what I'm hearing, or this afternoon on this House floor, this afternoon, is that your definition of a girl is, well, if you believe you're a girl, then you must be a girl. If you believe you're a girl, then you're a girl, and you can go into girls' locker rooms, regardless of whether you have male genitalia or not. I can't imagine the trauma that some of our girls go through in locker rooms having to see that. No, we're going to stand up for those girls today, this afternoon, to protect them. That's exactly what we're doing. That's what the truth is. You don't get to define what words are. Not for me, and not for those Minnesotans who are fearing for those girls, and their fears are real, and the fears of those girls are real. And you're blatantly disregarding them, saying, no, your fears don't exist. It's transphobic. Wrong. Wrong, Representative Long. You don't get to decide for me, and you don't get to decide for Minnesota what words mean. Tell you who decides for me, and I'm so glad I can declare his name on this House floor, that I have the freedom and the liberty to do it, the Lord Jesus Christ. Yeah, I see a roll in your eyes. Here we go. Here goes the religious pastor. Absolutely. My district sent me here to be their voice. Matthew 19:14, Jesus said, have you not read from the beginning, he that made them in the beginning made them male and female? Go look up those words he used in Greek, and go look up those words that he quoted from Genesis chapter 1, verse 27 in the Hebrew. They're binary. They're not transphobic. They're not hateful. Listen, if a person born as a biological male wants to believe that they're a girl, fine, let them believe that. But they're not going to dictate that for other people. That is wrong. See, I know where words come from. I know who the creator of them is. He made them male and female. And I'll unashamedly state the Lord Jesus Christ's words on this House floor. He knows what he's talking about. He's not a liar, and he's not crazy. He speaks truth in love. Here is truth. Irreversible male physiological advantages make fair competition impossible. Makes it impossible. And gee, I wonder why that sports team defended their pitcher. Is it because they won the state championship? Number two, it only discourages female athletes. And there's many of them that have come forward and even come to committee to talk about this, and you say their fears don't exist. It's not real. It also displaces them and undermines the purpose of real women's categories. And that is not hateful speech, that is truth speech. Number three, there's safety risks in contact and combat sports. We saw this in the Olympics with boxing. Those ladies got pounded by a male athlete. Pounded. One of them said, I've never been hit so hard in my life. How can you defend that? Privacy, dignity, and safety in locker rooms and changing areas. We're trying to protect that. Men in girls' sports and in girls' locker rooms violates that. There's a place for everyone to play sports in Minnesota. That is true. But girls shouldn't have to bear the discrimination of forced competition with male bodies. That's not right. Minnesota, you see this issue clearly an 80-20 issue. It means something to you. You know that girls should be protected from men in their locker rooms. You know that girls should be protected from bigger, stronger men competing in their sports. Yeah, Minnesota is on the right side of this issue. House Democrats are not. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Recognize a member from Ramsey, Representative Gottfried.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We having fun yet? So, you know, I've heard a lot today about quote-unquote biological reality. And I took, in the course of this very, very lovely debate that we've been having today, I took 30 seconds to read the bill because it's not very long. And it doesn't say anything about intersex people. And for those that don't know, intersex is a term for naturally occurring variations in sex characteristics, including chromosomes, hormones, genitalia that differ from the typical binary definitions of male or female. Intersex people are a biological reality. That is a biological reality that this bill ignores. And let's talk about some statistics here. We already heard that about 1% of the population is trans. Anyone care to venture a guess how many people are intersex? Up to about 5.6 million individuals are intersex, which is double the amount of trans folks that exist in our society. And so under this bill, how would we categorize them? How do they fit into that binary? Who is it that decides when their biological reality doesn't align with the binary that has been put forth in this bill? And that leads to some other very practical questions about how this bill would be enforced. Practically speaking, this bill would allow a game to be stopped mid-game to check a child's biological sexual characteristics. That's what this bill does. And who would do that inspection? Who is tasked to check a child's gender? Who is tasked to check their biological sexual characteristics? You know, I've heard a lot of talk about protecting our children, and I think it seems short-sighted, I will say, and give as much grace as I can, short-sighted to put a bill forth that would enable an adult to inspect a child's genitalia mid-game. And that's what this bill does. I also want to point out that in the course of this debate, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have used a child on that aforementioned softball team as a political prop and vilified them throughout this debate. And I think that's entirely inappropriate, what we are doing to a child, someone who has already been through an immense amount of adversity. And I think the fact that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have used a child as a political prop shows you just how much they care about the well-being of trans folks within our society. Because make no mistake, this bill is part of a larger effort within our society to erase trans folks from this society. Restricting gender-affirming care, prohibiting school staff from referring to students by their lived pronouns, limiting documentation from limiting people from updating their documentation in order to reflect their lived experience, and of course, limiting a child's ability to compete in sports in school. So make no mistake, while we're all talking about this bill in very polite and clinical terms, This bill and the others like it sit on an ideological through line that ends with the complete erasure of trans folks from our society. I'm not going to speak for any of my other colleagues. I am speaking solely for me. To me, that sounds like genocide. Now, I don't want to discount the fears that some folks feel about competing in this space. I believe their fears are real. But it is part of a larger hysteria that has been manufactured by the far right and our president to distract from the real issues that Minnesotans are facing. In fact, right now, it is 2:10 p.m. We should be an hour and 10 minutes into committee hearings hearing about bills that will actually benefit Minnesotans and try to improve the way that our government functions, and we are wasting our time on this bill that does nothing but exclude, that does nothing but cause harm, that puts our children at risk. Friends, this is political theater. This is political, and I see some laughs on the other side of the aisle, that's fine, we both do it, we all know that. But this is political theater, and it is the most dangerous kind that we can have, because it ends with the erasure of an entire group of people. Please vote no. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Roach.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of House File 2685. You know, it's funny that we have members on the other side of the aisle that bring up ridiculous arguments and talk about genocide. My gosh. No one here is talking about genocide. We're just talking about protecting our daughters in sports. Talk about gaslighting and astroturfing, genocide. We have members on the other side of the aisle talking about Iran. Newsflash, we don't govern Iran. We've got members on the other side, you know, constantly talking about Donald J. Trump. If Donald J. Trump was playing dress up and dressing up like a female, dressing up like a female and playing in our daughter's sports, we would have a problem with that. But it's not happening. You know, when I was a kid, kids went through hard times. They go through puberty. And kids get confused. And kids have to talk with people and need to go through changes in their body. And now we've taken that and weaponized it. At least some. Many of you have weaponized that. Turned it into gender dysphoria. You put a prohibition on conversion therapy, which allows therapists to talk through these issues that some of these young people are having, and vulnerable adults. Take tools away from therapists to be able to have kids and young adults feel comfortable in the skin that they're born in. But instead, we have sick adults, twisted ideology that wants to indoctrinate our children.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
State your point of order.
This is getting redundant. House Rule 2.31, offensive words in debate. Can we please not talk about a community of people as if they are sick individuals? Please.
As a reminder, members, we are on the suspension of rules for House File 2685. Please keep your comments related to that motion. Representative Roach.
We have adults that want to manipulate and emotionally take advantage of vulnerable children. It's disgusting. To make themselves feel comfortable in their own skin.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
I'll keep talking.
State your point of order.
I could use the same rule, House Rule 2.31. Offensive words in debate, if the representative could not stare down members of the Queer Caucus as he says words like disgusting. Thank you.
Members, as a reminder, we are on the suspension of rules for House File 2685. Please keep your comments related to the motion at hand. Representative Roach.
Madam Speaker, I will look at you. My goodness. You know, members over here talk about honesty. I'll end with this. They want honesty? Well, here's an honest fact. There's no such thing as a transgender child.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
I recognize a member from Olmsted, Representative Hicks.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm a practical person. I think I'm typically a legislator who wants to get stuff done. I'd like to do things. And I am frustrated because this bill doesn't even allow for it to be implemented. Who's checking the genitals? Who's paying the medical bills? Who's deciding which girls look too much like a trans person to have to go to the doctor and get checked? This is theater, and that's cool. Y'all want to do theater? Rock on, whatevs. But you're supposed to be in Ed Finance today with new members talking about a bill to stop special education cuts. A bipartisan bill, which, by the way, I'm on. And I have constituents from the disability community who traveled a really long way today to talk to you about how important that is. So could we just please get back to work? Because this whole thing is super ew.
I recognize a member from Nobles, Representative Fogelman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Knudsen, for bringing this bill today. As a parent of 2 kids that were in hockey, I have a daughter and a son, both played hockey from when they were little. They are 2 completely different kids. My girl is not a girly girl. She wasn't the dresses in pink. She had brothers and she played tough. And when she played, it was co-ed. My son also co-ed up to high school. When my daughter got to be in 8th grade, she wasn't able to play on the high school team yet because of where she was going to school in the Christian day school. So she still played with the boys, which was still allowed. And she really got smoked by a boy. And so it goes. She's tough. She got up, kept playing. She had a concussion when she got done, but she kept playing. I did not care for that much. Her dad said that she needed to keep playing, and she did. And then she went on to play with in the girls' team after that, and it was just girls. And my son just always played with the boys. So to say that there is not a biological difference, yes, my girl was not tiny. She was tough. And it still mattered that when she played with the boys, they were bigger and they were stronger. So yes, it makes a difference. I also think back to my mom who was in school, and that's when basketball started, not sports, basketball. I think of my sister. She was small. She's about the same height as me, but tiny. She maybe weighed 100 pounds in high school, and she was a runner. And she held state medals she held the I can't remember what her running score was, but she held that record for years. And had she been competing against a boy, I have no doubt that she would not have held that record in school at all. And she has a lot of medals because she worked hard, not competing against boys that were taller and faster. It's not to pick on a boy or to pick on a girl. It's just basic differences. Now, I know I've heard people say that it's not an issue at the door. I've heard it a lot of times, lots and lots of times. It's an 80-20 issue. We've heard that too. My constituents want to protect their girls. and we're being told that we're erasing people. There's nothing in here that says somebody can't compete in a sport. There's nothing in this bill that says that. But by saying that we are erasing people, yeah, we are. We're trying to erase women and girls from sports. I don't think when Representative Bennett's mom or when my mom started school, they didn't think about playing with the boys. That wasn't even an option. They didn't think they were getting discriminated against because they didn't get to play with boys. They were excited because they were women and they were getting to play a sport. So if we're gonna let biological boys play with the girls, then that's what we're doing. We're erasing what they work so hard to do. And I think that we're sitting here saying we need to get back to work. Yeah, we do. We should. We're taking now, the federal law says that we should not let this happen. The Olympics have made this rule now that girls and boys have to be separate. So now we're wasting our taxpayer dollars in a lawsuit because we won't comply. And we're also hurting our schools now because we could be risking billions of dollars in federal funding because we don't want to comply with the law. So yes, that's what we should be doing. That's why we're here. It's not, oh, we're Minnesota, let's make up our own law because we don't care what the federal government says. I think it's hard when you sit here and say kids are hurt because they can't play. You can't say that we're hurting them or not keeping them safe by letting girls play with boys or boys with girls. There's a time and a place for that. But they're also separated for a reason. So we need to keep our girls safe. It's important. And I would hope that you would teach your child that. And if you have a kid that doesn't know if they're a girl or a boy, then maybe you should encourage them to be happy with the skin that they're in and the way that their creator made them. So thank you again, Representative, for bringing this bill forward. Please vote yes.
I recognize the member from Chippewa, Representative Van Binsbergen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Knudsen. I rise in support. I stand for common sense. And let me tell you, this bill is all about common sense. It's hard for me to believe that we are here again. We started having this discussion a year ago, March. The voters in my district tell me they can't believe we are still having this discussion. This is basic common sense. It's an easy vote. This is a vote for what is right. It's a vote for what is safe. And it's a vote for what is fair. You know, I, like a lot of you in this chamber, we enjoy sports. And I tell you, I've been at more track meets, in more basketball gyms, on more golf courses watching cross country than I can imagine. And what I like about sports, it's the competition. It's working together. It's inspiring your teammates. And I have been as I have watched, and I have raised 3 kids. And as I have watched my kids participate, I've also watched girls' sports. And I tell you, and I used to play sports. And I'm so proud to see how girls' sports has advanced over the last 25 years. As I have raised my kids, I have 2 boys and 1 daughter, and I've watched them all play sports. There is clearly a difference. My son who is a multiple sport athlete, he runs in the 800 meter dash. Okay, that's twice around the track. He ran that in a minute 57 seconds, pretty fast. Take me a lot longer, okay? He's in good shape. Average girls run that same event in 2 minutes 35 seconds, 2 minutes 40 seconds. My point is there is clearly a difference. And as I am out and about in my district, and I'm hearing the folks, I am talking to them, I'm getting emails, and members on the other side say that this isn't an important issue. I'm hearing about it, and I know you're going to hear about it, and I know you're hearing about it as well. School boards from all across this state, including school boards in your district, are standing up, members are standing up and speaking out. It's time that we get this done and we move forward, because I agree, we've got lots of business to do in this state. We need to make it more affordable for Minnesotans, and there's a lot of work to be done. Let's make the right vote. This is all about doing what is called common sense. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Clay, Representative Joy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This to me is so simple. Thank you, Representative Knudsen, for bringing this forward. Boys are not girls. Vote green. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We've had quite another debate on this subject, and from the other side of the aisle, we've heard about deflecting. We've heard about Iran, who that regime, there's probably never been a more murderous regime and mistreating regime toward women than that one. We've heard about American atrocities. We've heard about behavior of President Clinton. We've heard about the Democrats wanting to get on with other business. Members, this is an important subject that our constituents want us to tackle, and it is common sense. And I also want to, before I just say a few closing remarks, I just want to say, regarding this, who's going to check their genitals? If you've played sports, you know that from the time you're small, you have to go through a physical. This is not rocket science. To the members of the Minnesota public, that is a total red herring. No one is going to go in the middle of a ball game and check that. That's between them and their doctor before they sign up to play. But members, there is a sense of urgency here. And I know some people think this is a manufactured problem, but evidently the International Olympic Committee doesn't think so. And also that conservative bastion that we all have come to know and love, the UN, thinks it's pretty important too. So, members, please vote to allow fairness, safety, and dignity for all Minnesota girls who participate in sports. This isn't about necessarily winning games. It's about developing confidence, endurance and strength, and character. I learned an awful lot being an average basketball player. And one of the things I did learn was there are people better than me. And I didn't have to worry about going up against the guys who, when I was a junior, went to state that year, who would have, they were 6'2" and 6'4", some of them, right? I was able to experience girls' sports. My daughter was, and I want my granddaughter Jane to have that same experience. So today, the vote today here is a vote for dignity, safety and fairness and athletic competition. Please vote green.
I recognize a member from Cass, Representative Knudsen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Thanks for this great, robust debate. One thing that's come up time and time again in our discussion is why the urgency? Why the urgency? There's an urgency because federal law matters and federal lawsuits matter. The lawsuit matters because it's an unnecessary expense. While our governor is proposing another $50 million in cuts to special education on top of the $250 million cuts from last year, there is an urgency because this lawsuit will cost the state of Minnesota millions. But why the urgency? Because we're trying to protect the girls of Minnesota. To the parents of female athletes, including myself, I am so proud to be the mom of 3 beautiful daughters. All 3 are playing sports. But my oldest daughter, she's been moved up to varsity. She excels at basketball, she excels at volleyball, and she excels at track. She's a high jumper. And if you want to know the stark difference between boys and girls, look at high jump. Last year, my daughter, as a 7th grader, took 13th in state in high jump. She jumped 5'2". The state record for high jump in Minnesota for males is 7 foot 1 inch. The state record for females is 6 feet. 13 inches different. If a male could enter into the girls' high jump, that would crush the dreams, the aspirations, and the hard work of every single girl that has worked their entire career to beat that record. This bill is for the parents of female athletes and coaches across our state who have been silenced by the fear of being called names. To the young women who just missed the roster or the podium because a biological male took their spot, this bill is for you. To every Minnesota girl who has dreams and aspirations of being the next Lindsay Wallen, this bill is for you. We owe our daughters protection based on reality. We owe them the chance to compete, to win, and to fail on equal terms with other girls. Again, biology is not bigotry. Members, let today be the day that Minnesota finally takes a stand to protect the daughters of our state. Vote green.
I recognize a member from Anoka, Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I request a call of the House.
There's been a request for the call of the House. I see more than 10 hands. There will be a call of the House. The clerk will take the roll. As a reminder, you must press your own button. The clerk will close the roll. Representative Niska. Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this vote is about a very simple thing: fairness. It protects girls' sports, and it ensures that Title IX means what it says it means, what it was intended to mean: equal opportunity for women and girls. For more than 50 years, Title IX has guaranteed a level playing field, and as a parent, as a coach, I have seen how much this matters. I have seen how sports matter. My sons play sports. My daughter played youth sports and is now a collegiate athlete. Sports are so valuable, and we've heard about that discussion today. They teach discipline, perseverance, and teamwork. But those things only work if we have a fair and safe playing field. And right now in Minnesota, that fairness has been taken away. We separate competition by age, by weight, by division. All of those things are legal. We could even separate sports, as has been suggested, by something about your parents and how they taught you, how well they taught you. Those are all legal in Minnesota. But because Democrats have chosen ideology over common sense, what has become illegal in Minnesota is to separate sports by the most common sense, obvious separation, division: biological sex. Democrats have chosen ideology over fairness and ideology over the rights that women fought for and secured under Title IX. And Minnesotans see it. A New York Times poll found that 79% of Americans, including 67% of Democrats, believe girls' sports should be reserved for girls based on biological sex. This isn't controversial. The only place this is controversial is here at the Capitol. What's controversial is the position held by Governor Walz, by Attorney General Ellison, by Minnesota Democrats, including the 7 Democrat-appointed members of the Minnesota Supreme Court. Minnesota Democrats have staked out a position that is extreme, out of touch, and puts girls at a disadvantage. And Minnesotans are going to see now whether you want to change course or double down. We've heard a lot of deflection, as has been discussed, a lot of discussion about Iran or things that are out of our control here in the Minnesota State Capitol. But what is in our control is taking up this bill and passing it. And it absolutely is an urgency. It's an urgency for 3 reasons. The first is the Minnesota Supreme Court ruling from last October. We heard this euphemistically referred to as Minnesota Supreme Court affirmed transgender inclusion in the law. People of Minnesota, I think you need to understand exactly what happened at the Minnesota Supreme Court last October. A powerlifting organization tried to say, we are going to have competition, women's powerlifting competition in Minnesota, and Minnesota Democrat activists, backed by the Walz administration, backed by the Attorney General, sued and said, you have to include someone who is a biological male, someone whose sex is male. And the Minnesota Supreme Court, all Democrat-appointed judges on the Minnesota Supreme Court ruled, Minnesota law does not allow a sports organization like a powerlifting organization, like a boxing organization, like a volleyball organization, any Minnesota sports organization or organization having a sports competition in Minnesota cannot say we are going to have a women's category and exclude those with XX chromosomes, biological males by the definition of sex. That is current Minnesota law. We have to fix that. We have to fix that, not only because it's wrong for our kids, because it's common sense. And even the International Olympic Committee has recognized that it's common sense. They've moved to protect women's competition. And the reason they did it is because there was someone with XX chromosomes boxing against women. We heard a lot of crazy talk today about assault, about violence against women. Having a boxing organization, having a wrestling competition in which women cannot exclude men from hitting them in the face, that's what we can control. That's what this vote is about. If you're for women going into a boxing ring and getting punched in the face by someone with XX chromosomes who went through male puberty, vote no. Vote no. The people of Minnesota are watching. But if you think that should change, if you think that women and girls should be able to compete against only other women and girls if they so choose, then we need to pass this bill. And we need to take up off the table House File 12 and House File 1233 and pass those two. Minnesota Democrats, the people of Minnesota are watching. They're watching your decisions, and they're watching the decisions that you have made that are putting Minnesota on the hook legally and financially. Can we have an Olympic trial in the state of Minnesota? Minnesota has a proud Olympic tradition. We just had, I think, the most Winter Olympic athletes of any state. Could we have Olympic trials for cross-country skiing in the state of Minnesota legally? I don't think so. It's pretty common sense. But we're also on the hook legally and financially because of this lawsuit filed by the Department of Justice, arguing that our state policies violate Title IX and give girls equal opportunity. Think about that. Minnesota Democrats, Attorney General Ellison's decisions, Governor Walz's decisions, our so-called education governor, putting billions of dollars at risk for our schools. Members, people of Minnesota, this is where we decide what we stand for. Do we stand for fairness and equal opportunity, or do we stand for policies that take opportunities away from girls, that force girls to compete against those who have a biological advantage against them, including in combat sports? House File 2685 draws that line clearly. It protects girls' sports. It protects equal opportunity. That's what you're voting for if you vote green. And I'm worried, based on the discussion here, we're not going to get over the line to suspend the rules. But here's the good news. We can still fix this today. We just need one courageous Democrat to cross the line to take up House File 12 or House File 1233 off the table and pass those as well. We can pass those with just one Democrat vote today. So people of Minnesota, pay attention. Pay attention. Are we going to have a single Minnesota Democrat who will stand up for girls' sports, who will stand up for women's sports? If not, 2026 is coming. 210 days to the election. Girls' sports is on the ballot, Minnesota. Girls' sports is on the ballot. If you support fairness and opportunity for girls and women in sports, vote green. If you put ideology over fairness and common sense, vote red. Members, vote yes.
The clerk will take the roll. Members, the House is under call. You must vote. The clerk will call the names of the members participating remotely.
Katiza Watun.
Katiza Watun, no.
Katiza Watun votes no. Lee F.
Lee F, no.
Lee F votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 67 ayes and 66 nays, the motion does not prevail.